Hello everyone. I'm going to discuss with you the effects of divorce on learning and education. A step is still a step, even if it's a long one. So according to the CDC in 2019, the marriage rate for the United States was 6.1 per 1,000 people. Just to take a general note, that the marriage rate has actually been going down since 2016. Now, when we look at the other end of that, the divorce rate, according to the CDC in 2019, is 2.7 per 1,000 people. However, I would like it noted that this data excludes California, Hawaii, Indiana, Minnesota, and New Mexico. And without those states, it could be speculated the divorce rate might actually be slightly higher. But still, that's roughly a 44.3% divorce rate. There is, however, the immigrant difference, and according to Ann Snyder's article about marital demography, immigrants stay married at a higher rate than those of their American-born counterparts. The children of immigrants are born at a much higher percent to be in a married household couple, though Hispanics are the least likely to be married, however, do stay in a cohabitation relationship. Asian immigrants have a divorce rate that is half of the United States, so roughly 22% versus the 44% of the United States. Now, with divorce, there is a holistic effect in that it just doesn't involve children. There's also the spouse, and that the spouse and its effect on them have effect on the children. So first, let's look at the effect on the spouse, where there's an emotional one, where it's been stated that spouses who are going through a divorce have a similar emotional response as one grieving from the loss of a spouse if there was a death. There is also a financial component in this, is that money is completely different now. It could be that people are paying out child support, receiving child support, be paying out alimony, receiving palimony, and it could just be they went from being a two income household to just being a single income household, and that money is not coming in the way it used to. So there's a change in the lifestyle that everyone has to deal with. And then there's also a social aspect for the spouse where everyone is meeting new friends, splitting up old friends that were within their network. And then there's also new family dynamics, which is spouses could be experiencing stepchildren could be experiencing uh, stepmoms and stepdads or other stepchildren. So children have that whole social effect going on too. But what is the effect on the child? So, according to the article, The 10 Effects of Divorce on Children, children go through a state of anger where their world is changing. They don't know how to cope with or act, so they just only know how to be angry because that's an easy emotion to go with. Some become socially withdrawn. So, if they socially withdraw, they don't talk to anybody or converse, and they keep to themselves. Grades begin to suffer, and with the grades suffering, it can lead to further problems down the line, and grades may also be suffering because of some of the things that they're dealing with, such as withdrawing socially, and the anxiety that they feel, and the separation anxiety that they may have with their parents as they have to go away for the weekend to another parent's and leave another parent behind, or vice versa. And sometimes these children can psychologically regress. So an older child may go back to bedwetting or some other sort of emotional state of a younger child. This also can affect eating and sleeping, whereas a child may eat or more or less, and the sleeping patterns completely change, and that could be based off of new sleeping arrangements. That could be them suffering from emotional stress and anxiety. There's just so many aspects from the sleeping standpoint that it's you can't just put one finger on it, but it's just multitude. And it could also be that within a divorce, children are forced to pick sides. And there's a lot of anxiety because who really wants to pick a side when you like both sides and don't want to see those sides split? And ultimately, that can just lead to depression, where children are just from a holistic standpoint feeling down and blue, and there may be some blame, so they again withdraw some. So research has shown that the effect on children is more psychosocial and not a cognitive one. So meaning that there's less a biological aspect that you have to be concerned about, but there is a behavioral one. So psychosocial relating to the social factors and individual thoughts and behaviors of a person is where we're dealing with when it comes to the children and what's going on with that divorce. So typically the results that occur from this is poor grades and poor self-esteem. And in the article, Divorce and Approaches to Learning and Children's Academic Achievement basically confirms with the previous slide statement that it is psychosocial. That in that psychosocial, they're allowing their actions to change and manipulate how they behave in school. So if they're not studying or if they're not doing the work, they get poor grades. That poor grades can lead to poor self-esteem, which then allows them to continue to get poor grades because they don't put in the work. And then that eventually leads to smaller chances for them to go into higher education without some sort of factor coming in and changing that cycle. So children between the ages of 13 to 18 suffer a 10.6% decrease in the likelihood of going to likelihood of university admission at 18, and a 15.7 decrease in the likelihood of public university admission at the same age. So basically, higher rank university versus maybe your public or state university, there's less likelihood of them getting in. So with parental divorce being a focus here, there's also a thought, well, what if it is the fact that economic resources are less because they're in a single family household? Well, in the same article, they looked at that fact and they found that it is not about economic resources, it's strictly related to parental divorce. So what can we do? And through the various articles, they all state what can be done and how to help children. And for an educator, what can you do? And that is help parents when they need it. And then for the child, it may also be that you need to be there for them and possibly be a steady form of foundation. So how do we help these children cope? Can they regulate? Are they lacking any particular skill that they need to focus on because they may have slacked off on some particular aspect of their education due to the divorce that we need to help them build up? Are their relationships in such disrepair that they need something beyond a teacher to assist, which might require us to go to recommend outside resources in like school counselors, psychiatrists, and if need be, up to tutoring to help get the child back to where they need to be. So I'm going to discuss two folks that I interviewed who have gone through divorces and what their experiences were, the effects were, and how they were able to overcome one quicker than other. So first I'm going to talk about JH. JH separated from their spouse, and there was some mental health issues involving their spouse. However, though, they both shared responsibilities pretty well, and when the spouse was regulated, they were able to stay some focus on the children, but they were able to agree to work together for their child. And some of that was to seek a psychiatrist because their daughter was experiencing very poor grades due to the lack of motivation to complete the work and a lack of understanding for the work because of the distractions of the parents going through the divorce, and then they also suffered from her lying about any of what work she was actually doing. So there was just a whole slew of problems going on in her life that the parents had to work and overcome and achieve through the use of a psychiatrist or psychologist and tutors. So she went through therapy and discussed what was going on and her experiences with her parents' divorce. And then on top of that, in order to catch back up, they had to use tutors to get her understanding of the subject matters back up to where she was supposed to be at that particular age group. But between the therapy and the tutors, she was able to get her grades back up to where she was prior to the divorce, which was an A, somewhat B student, but mostly A, to being the A, somewhat mostly B student that she was. So through the outside assistance, they were able to get her back to where she once was. GF had a different sort of spouse relationship where it was a little bit more of a bad divorce, as one would call it, and GF had no help from their spouse. So when the kids would go over to the other spouse, they would sit there and not have to do schoolwork. That spouse did not concern themselves on making sure that they went to bed on time, had any sort of consistency, allowed video games as they wanted, and provided GF with no assistance on any discipline for the children to actually study and get education. And in the article of shared parenting or shared care, it basically states that it is a family's total responsibility to help look out for these kids, and those parents who took responsibility from both ends were able to have a higher success rate in producing children who did not suffer the same effects in their education as the parents who basically had somewhat of a less successful divorce. And with GF's case, he had to eventually pull out of public schooling because they weren't able to get any assistance from the school, to go into a private school where they were able to get more of a catered care for their children's need, and their children were able to bring their grades back up to where they need to be. But in both examples, it showed that outside resources were needed. So the conclusion is that even though divorce exists and it will delay, it just shows that a divorce doesn't necessarily mean it's an end to the step on that rise. It just means, like in the picture shown here, that they may have to take a few steps before they can go back up the steps and continue their climb. So divorce does affect everybody and shouldn't be considered lightly. Children's education does suffer as they go through it, and the children's potential to go on to college does diminish because of divorce. But with hard work and therapy and outside resources, children can rebound and go on to university. These are the resources that I used to do my presentation, and here are the resources that would be available to anyone if they were going through divorce. I would share for them to go online and read and get some sort of assistance in helping. So thank you very much, and take care.